Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Harbert, your host, and with me today, we have a very special guest, and that's Mr. Bobby Valentine. And most of you all know who he is, but for the few of you who haven't paid enough attention to life, I'll give you kind of an update. This guy, he's an author for one thing. I've loved reading his latest book, Valentine's Way. But Bobby has a lot of story to tell. He's been involved with baseball from as a youth, and he's also been through as far as a player in Major League Baseball, but also as a career manager and being part of Baseball Biz. That's a big thing, what we like to talk about with Bobby today. And Bobby, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Mark, good being with you. Thank you very much. I hope you and your listeners are well and enjoying the baseball season.
Absolutely, man. It's exciting. You know, it's just a tenth of the way into the season, but already a lot of crazy stuff going on out there. And it's a lot about, building a team and managing a team. And like I said, being part of Baseball Biz, we want to talk about that. But first, I want to thank you to a good friend of mine, Jeff Brown, whose grandfather, Phil Cavaretta. He admired you. I know both of them did. Phil, I think, was with the Mets at one point when you were there as well. But my buddy Jeff, he said, he says, one thing, he says, when I think of him, I think also like of Joe Torre. And both of those, they remind me of my grandpa, classy, smart, and a true leader.
Yeah, Phil was a hitting coach when I was a player. Great person. He came every day with a smile and always wanted to help.
Jeff was talking about being a leader. I mean, that is such a key to being a manager of a team. And there's so many facets of it. I know we have just a little time today, so I'm going to try to keep it keep it short and sweet. But there's so many things when starting like from your transition to a player to a manager. How difficult was that? And was there anybody there to kind of give you some guidance?
Well, I can't really say it went that quickly, but what happened is I broke my leg when I was a young player, 23 years old. I hung on as a player for another 6 years, but realized that my career wasn't going to be as a player, that I was just going to be a hold on and an extra player until they released me. And finally, Joe Torre released me in 79. I hooked up with the Mariners for one more year and then realized that I loved baseball enough that I was going to start all over. And so I became a roving instructor in the minor leagues, in the lowest minor leagues. I would go around and try to impart knowledge to young players. And then an opening came up when I was 32 years old to coach third base with the New York Mets. And, when you're a young person and you're coaching people who are older than you start to establish those leadership qualities that are needed in order to, I guess, manage them eventually. And by the time I was 35, I caught another break where one of my teammates, Tom Grieve, who sat the bench with me with the New York Mets. We played seldom, but we were in uniform together every day. Tom Grieve became the general manager of the Texas Rangers and hired me as the manager. So at an early age, I was leading and learning to lead. And it's not as easy as it looks.
I don't know, man. Anybody who watches it, I don't think I see any manager who I look at, that's got to be an easy job. And part of that, we all see whether there's something going on in the field, but we also know there's a lot going back in the locker room and a lot in the front office. And looking at you, I know with like the Texas Rangers, Bobby, I'm seeing what you even had to go through a part of a time where a transition of ownership. But before we get into that, I want to say too, kudos to you, because early on, you were addressing things that people weren't really looking at yet. I mean, analytics. I read the one part in the book where you're talking about, waiting outside in St. Pete at the bookstore for them to open to get the latest Bill James baseball abstract.
Yeah, it was crazy. As a matter of fact, I was at the mall before the bookstore opened, and the books were delivered, and they were laying on the floor in front of the bookstore, if you could imagine, in beautiful St. Pete, Florida, as I remember it. And I just took one of the books and left the money on the pile of books, waiting for the owner to open the store, and went off to practice where. I was being that young 32-year-old coach with the Mets and the Met organization. Yeah, that was cool. 1982, as I remember.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, man, I mean, that's exciting because you're looking with a foresight that a lot of people hadn't already addressed. I mean, analytics has always become such a big part of the game today, but you saw that as well. And the other thing I was looking at too is, you had a strength and conditioning coach. A lot of people didn't know that there was some other ways people were getting strong in the game, but you were looking at, was it Tom House?
Yeah, sure. Tom House was a fabulous coach on my staff. He was a player. He's the guy who caught Hank Aaron's 715th home run in the bullpen of the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. And one of the great guys and one of the real creative people to ever work in baseball. He and I just wanted to figure it out. We didn't want to just say, yes, we heard what is true. We wanted to try to prove what was true. So, yeah, not only using analytics, we were using slow motion video back in the mid 80s. We were videotaping swings and throws so that we could watch them in slow motion. But it wasn't anything like the technology of today, for sure. But we tried to scratch the surface, and then we got a little deeper.
Yeah, and again, somebody has to scratch that surface in the beginning. Well, we're talking about strength and development, but also managing your assets, and by that I mean the players, keeping them healthy. I was reading in your book also about Nolan Ryan and making sure, to extend his career in there. So there were, you weren't necessarily out there having him pitch over 100 per game.
Well, when we first got Nolan, he was coming off of an elbow injury where we weren't quite sure what those elbow injuries were. And again, in the late 80s. And, Tommy John, who was a teammate of mine, actually hurt his elbow and had that operation that we now call Tommy John surgery. But Nolan opted not to do that. And Dr. James Andrews said, well, you better limit his pitches. And along with what we were doing with Nolan, we met with Dr. Andrews. We met with other people in the field of orthopedic surgery. And we decided that 15 pitches an inning was probably what an arm could do. And if we were going to do it for 9 innings, that'd be 135 pitches if it was done at a regular pace. And we kind of implemented a pitch count back then, which was almost unheard of.
Yeah, but I mean, it was the beginning of some healthy steps for maintaining a great player, and probably part of the reason we've all been able to enjoy an extended career, if you will, with Nolan Ryan. So thank you for that as a baseball fan as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to be in Texas this coming weekend, where Nolan's documentary is going to be shown after the Sunday game on May 1st. I'm looking forward to seeing Nolan and a lot of the old guys who had a lot to do with his career.
Well, that's great, man. I hope you enjoy that. I know all the fans will there as well. Getting to the part of a manager, we were talking about analytics and strength and some of the technical aspects, but a big part again is working with that front office and working with players. And you got a lot of personalities. And as a leader, you have to assert yourself. But sometimes those personalities, I saw even when you were the Rangers, Goose Gossage, he was like, well, what are you doing with this Nolan Ryan guy? At least from what I could see, he's like, guess what, buddy? He's a talent, and we've got to take care of him. So was it difficult to communicate to those folks, or was it even necessary to say, look, I'm the manager, and here's how it's going to get done?
No, I think it was, I tried to talk to people about, being a team, and that the most unfair thing that a leader could do is treat people who were unalike the same way. So, I had Kenny Rogers, a young left-hander on the team at the time. I had Nolan Ryan on the team. To think that I was going to treat a 21-year-old left-handed pitcher from Plant City, Florida, the same as I would treat a 40-year-old right-hander from Alvin, Texas, who is at the end of his career. One at the beginning of his career was probably the most unfair thing a leader could do. So, Nolan had some special situations. He needed the workout after he pitched. So if he pitched the last day of a homestand, he would stay in Texas, get his workout in the next morning at 7 or 8 a.m. when he would wake up, finish a workout, catch a plane, and meet the team in the city that we were off to. And a lot of guys couldn't figure out exactly why that was happening, because that old mentality was everyone stands in line and marches to the same beat. But the fact of the matter is, you treat individuals as individuals, and then they become a team.
Wise words, brother. I tell you, I'm glad to hear that. As a manager, when I was younger, and I didn't watch so much of the depth of this, I thought, this man controls everything about this team. I thought, well, he picks all of his players. He knows everything he's going to do. People like Steinbrenner should not even breathe to people like a manager. But that doesn't happen. And sometimes the communication isn't there. I know, reading your book again, I was looking at the story about Steve Buechelle. Here's a guy who's on your team. Things are really looking great, and you're reaffirming some things, and then everything changes.
Well, it does change. And, with Steve Buechelle, is a great guy and one of my favorite players at the time, just had a situation where he was older. We had young guys coming up. He could be a free agent soon. So we're trying to see what his value was. When we realized the value wasn't going to be met, I had lunch with him and said, hey, don't worry about it. You're not getting traded. Today's the deadline, but you're going to be with us. But the team, Pittsburgh Pirates, came back and upped the offer. So all of a sudden the price was met, and I had to take him out in the fifth inning, I guess, after I told him he wasn't going to be traded, and told him I was only kidding at lunch. You really did get traded.
Oh, damn, brother. I tell you, that's got to hurt. I mean, in the middle of a game, it's like, by the way, we're moving you now. It's time to leave. That's got to be tough, but that's part of your job, I guess, as the manager.
Well, working together with Tom Grieve was really fun. Again, he was such a good person, and I was lucky enough to have him as my friend, and also have him as my boss. So, that was an amazing 7 years of building a team and building relationships.
And you built a lot with that team. One of the things that, while I was telling you about my little myopic view of what a manager might be, was you were involved in what made that team tick and what was going to be part of their future. You were very involved in making sure that they were going to be able to get that new stadium for the Texas Rangers.
Well, that was part of my job. I lived in the community all year round, and during the winter time, when the votes were going to be cast by the city council as to whether or not they're going to increase the sales tax by a 0.5% by those people who didn't live in the area, to allow the funding to go to building a new stadium, I was out on the soapbox, preaching the virtues of baseball and professional teams and new stadiums and all that good stuff, so that people would get in tuned as to the value of keeping a team. And at that time, Mark, Tampa, St. Pete had built that dome that's still standing where the Rays play today, but it was new at the time. And it was the kind of the tease factor for Major League Baseball teams, that, a Major League Baseball team that wanted to build a new stadium would say to their constituents, if you don't give us the money, we're going to leave and go to Tampa, because they already have a new stadium, and we'll just pick up and leave. And I guess, the White Sox and the Giants and the Rangers all benefited by, teasing their constituents that they were actually going to leave and move to Tampa. And instead of letting the baseball team move, most of these franchises got what they needed.
Yeah, I loved reading that part. As a matter of fact, I pulled that excerpt from your book on a show we did a few weeks ago about teams that were moving and looking for funding for their stadium. So I saw that. I can't remember. Did you refer to it as a mausoleum, an empty mausoleum at that point?
Well, That the place down there in Tampa it's not inspiring, except for the fact that it's built some really spectacular teams.
Yeah.
It's a great organization in a crummy building.
That's, well, having been a fan and living down here in Tampa for several years, I can appreciate that. So thank you, buddy. Let's see what else. Oh my gosh, man. I mean, if you're looking at changes in your life, and after the Texas Rangers, you're looking across the water, you're looking at Japan. That was a whole new thing, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that kind of changed my whole life. After Texas, I actually got a job with the Mets in their AAA organization and managed there. And while I was managing there, a Japanese team hired a president general manager to spend the year in the United States, go around the States, figure out who it is that could possibly be the first ever non-Japanese to manage in the professional league in Japan. And this baseball god from Japan, Hiroka-san, spent his year, interviewed people, watched them manage, asked questions about them, and finally, after the season was over, met with me and offered me the job to be the first ever non-Japanese to manage in Japan. And I jumped at the opportunity. I thought it was something that would change my life, and it did.
Yeah, and you came back later on in your career as well. I remember, as far as winning a championship as well. Can't remember.
Yeah, that was in 2005. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I kind of jumped back and forth. I was there, came back, managed the Mets for 7 years, went back to Japan, managed there for 7 years, and extended all that stuff. It was fun. And now I'm out in California. I'm advising the general manager. I'm doing TV pre and post game for the LA Angels, and it's amazing to see Ohtani and Trout on the same field every night. When you talk about world class, it's come a long way to bring the worlds together.
Yeah, it has, and I guess now, because I know that one thing I read in your book too is you've actually learned Japanese. I thought, wow, there's not enough managers who can speak to all the players on the team anyway these days. That was encouraging. But when you came back, you were offered a job, I think, initially as a Mets manager, but it didn't prove to be actually on the MLB Big Show Mets to start with. It was kind of like, okay, come on in, come on over, Bobby, we got this gig for you. Oh, by the way, did we tell you you're going to be going to Norfolk?
Yeah, it's kind of the way it worked out. I came back thinking I'd leave a promising job and career managing in Japan to come back and manage the Mets. But when I got there, the general manager said he was only kidding, but there was a job opening that I could interview for at AAA. Luckily for my life and my career, it all worked out where I got to manage the Mets later in that season in August after being back in AAA, and had a really spectacular time in New York.
That's fantastic. And a lot of people say, well, they just lucked into that. But the thing of it is, one, you have to already have created a career, and you have to be able to make sure you're smart about how to take care of the the potential opportunities that become before you. And you had a lot of guidance over the years too. I mean, your good friend and a gentleman who we all love and passed this, and that's Mr. Lasorda. I know he had been kind of a driving force too in your early career.
Oh, Tommy Lasorda was, my guardian angel. He just, hooked on and attached. We attached to each other in rookie baseball. He was a manager. People always think of him just as the Hall of Fame manager that he became, but he started at the bottom. That's in rookie ball. That's where you play 2.5 months, traveling around in buses and 10-hour bus rides. And after doing that for a few years, he went to AAA. And after doing that, he got to the big leagues as a coach. And after being a coach, he became a manager. So I was lucky enough to play for him in Ogden, Utah, rookie ball, and AAA in Spokane, Washington, and the Dominican Republic, in Santo Domingo, and in Venezuela, in Caracas. And he was making his mark as I was making mine. So we kind of started together, and as it turned out, he finished. We finished together, where I was lucky enough to give the eulogy at his funeral, and his impact on my life was immeasurable.
People will get that if they read the book, and it's, again, I'm going to encourage people. The name of the book is Valentine's Way by Bobby Valentine, who we're talking with right now. I know what you and Lasorda got to work together. You brought him on your all-star team, didn't you?
Yeah, I was never in uniform with him in the major leagues. I got traded from the Dodgers in '72. He became a coach with the Dodgers in the major leagues in '73. So we went on our separate ways. And when I got to manage the 2001 All-Star Game, I petitioned the commissioner to allow Tommy to be in uniform, even though he had already retired as a manager. Kind of brought him back for that day in July, and he was my bench coach, if you will, and then even had a stint as the third base coach for an inning, much against my thoughts. He said, "Bobby, put me out there. I'll get you some runs. Put me out there at third base." And I put him out, and the first batter that was at the plate was Vladimir Guerrero Sr., who swung at one of those sliders like he often did and let go of the bat. And the bat was propelled in Lasorda's direction, right at his head, down at the third base coaching box. Luckily, he did a back roll. The bat eluded him, and he got a standing ovation when he got back to his feet.
Oh gosh! Oh, those are the stories that make baseball. The legends, but those special moments that everybody can remember, recall. I mean, it may not be the grand slam. Sometimes it's just those simple moments like that warm our hearts when it comes to the game. So. Oh
yeah, memories are memories. Yeah, Mark, you're right.
Like I was talking about Tommy Lasorda being a friend and a mentor. There was a bit of guidance you got early in your career too. I guess it was when you were in Texas, and that came from Tom Landry. That was about picking your own coaches. I mean, I think of like when a president comes into office and they have to have their own cabinet. They've got to have people that they can trust and come up with. And I always hope that's the case with a manager, but that isn't always how it happens. I mean, you've had to confront that in a couple of different places, haven't you?
Well, yeah, Landry came in. He lived in Stamford, Connecticut, because he was a friend of Andy Robustelli, and a teammate. Andy was from Stamford, Connecticut. He became a Hall of Fame defensive end for the Giants, and later the general manager for the Giants. Later a businessman in Stamford, Connecticut, and because I was now in Texas and Tom Landry and Andy were friends, Andy gave him a call and he said, "Stop in on the young guy and give him some advice." So after about 30 minutes of sitting in my office, telling me some of the good restaurants to go to in the Dallas Metroplex, he got up to leave and said, "Hey, I have one bit of advice I have for you." And said, "What's that?" He said, "Make sure your coaches speak your language." And, that's just so true, in that you don't have to have people who are yes men on your staff, but you have to have people who are speaking your speak. Right. So that players are hearing things in stereo and they're not confused. It's only a 6-month season. And sometimes mixed messages could cause a series to be lost, or even a game to be lost, because one person is a little confused by the message that's being delivered. So yeah, that was a really impactful message that was delivered.
Yeah. And I wish, sometimes wouldn't it would be nice if managers had their own CBA with MLB, because I sometimes feel like managers are taken advantage of. I looked at Tom Schilt this past year and I'm like, really? Philosophical differences? I'm not going to get in that, because that's their situation to deal with. But as a fan, you wind up scratching your head and say, I don't feel like somebody's treating that guy right. And so it's coming in, being able to have your own set of coaches, like I said, not necessarily being a reflection of everything you think about, but people you can work with, people who can, what do I want to say, who have a professional mindset like yourself, You say, okay, this gentleman's the manager. I'm the coach. I'm going to give my input. But guess what? As a team, we have a manager. We have to follow a thought process, and we got to work together.
Yeah, in Japan, they have a wonderful ritual, and that is when you win a championship, all the players gather around in the middle of the field after doing their celebration, and then they pick the manager in their hands, and they hoist them in the air, and they catch them, and then they hoist them in the air, and then they catch them, and they hoist them in the air, and they catch them 3 times. And the reason they do that is because to win a championship, what's needed is for the players to trust the manager.
Right.
And once you win the championship, then it's the time for the manager to trust the player. And so, that kind of symbolism holds true in every organization, that, you don't know what the outcome is going to be until it's over. And then it's usually too late. And to get the best outcome, any group needs to be together and be on the same page. And that usually takes trust and leadership.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that was the case, certainly in Japan. And I didn't realize that what that ritual was about. So thank you for sharing that with us too, Tommy. Again, we're talking with Tommy Lasorda from Valentine's Ways, his book out there. I'm going to say, if I didn't say it earlier, it's a great read, people. I got caught up in it. Once you start going through it, it's very easy to read. And for somebody like me, little short chapters help. But I couldn't help but want to going on to the next chapter. And one of the chapters really caught me too is, I think, Fenway 100. And once you get to Boston, and that was kind of a little bit of a rough ride, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just for clarification, all listeners out there, he's not doing a seance here. He's talking. We're Mark and Bobby Valentine talking about Tommy Lasorda. When I got to Boston, it was a 7-month journey. I was kind of there to weed out the weak and clean up the mess. It seemed like there was a mess when I got there, and there was some chicken and beer and dissension and guys who were on different pages. And I got to enjoy the 100th anniversary of Fenway Park with great celebrations during the year, where some of the great players from the past came back, and they had a lot of those celebrations, but also had a very trying season where there were more injuries, I think, on the team, to good players and to other players than any other team had experienced up until that time. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, that's for sure.
Well, you dealt with it well. I'm going to pause.
Well, I guess I dealt with it the best that I could. Yeah.
I'm going to pause here for just a second. Did I misspeak and say Tommy Lasorda?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
That's all right. I cleaned it up.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap things up because I know you got to take care of business.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
Sure. Bobby, I want to thank you again. I mean, your career didn't end there because, you started out life and a lot of things you were doing in Stanford, and you came back there, as a community leader. You were doing a lot. What was it with Sacred Heart, with the athletics department? How'd that work out?
Well, I spent 7 years being the director of athletics at Sacred Heart University, Division I school in Fairfield, Connecticut. I had a great experience and opportunity to do what I had to do. And when I left, I got a building with my name on it. We had 32 Division I sports teams that were flourishing, and I was really proud of that experience.
Well, I think it's always great when you kind of come back home, as you're through a career. And I know you've done a lot with that. I know you ran for political office, and you continue to do work there as well. But you've also, as you pointed out to us, you're working with the Angels, and I know you got a game a little bit later today, don't you?
Yeah, Game 4 against the Guardians, who are in town from Cleveland, and it would be an amazing sweep if we could win all 4. So, going to get out there and see how everyone feels. Make sure Mike Trout's hamstring's okay, and Shohei Ohtani is ready to go after getting the win on the mound and getting a couple hits at the plate. Boy, is that a scene to watch at the major league level. And see if we keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's exciting times. I know watching the Angels is always fun. I wish you and the Angels a great season, my friend. And Bobby Valentine, again, it's great having you here. We're talking about your book also, Valentine's Way. Again, I cannot encourage folks enough to read this book because you're going to love it. I think it's available in hardback and Kindle. So any other final words you'd like to share? Any guidance you'd like to give future baseball players or managers?
Well, just that passion is what you want to follow. And Mark, you do a great job with your podcast here, and hopefully people will learn from it and enjoy. Remember that what you're good at is what you should pursue. And when you're good at something, you can learn to love it. So have fun and enjoy.
Bobby, I can't thank you enough again. That's Bobby Valentine here on Baseball Biz. It was great to have him on. And again, I encourage everybody to check out that book, Valentine's Way. Thank you again for listening to Baseball Biz. And we hope to talk with you real soon. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music, Rocky Forward.